Okay, so here we are in kind of the final wrap and scoring for EU. I want to thank anybody who's watched through all of these. I think there's probably a few of you. I just see the numbers on there, and it's kind of, there's a steady 40 or so who I think are hitting just about every one. And wow. It pleases me greatly that, you know, anybody cares, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's just, this is such a tremendous undertaking, and playing, it's one thing. I get to play a game. You guys just get to watch me play. Anyway, what did we get for the final periods victory points? And I zoom you in on them right here, but let's go over them a little bit in specific. Let's look at England first. They had their port in the West Mediterranean. They did not have colonies in North America, not enough. They need 4 of them adjacent, and 2 of them are in revolt. That doesn't work. They can't. That's essentially a new America forming there if they can't handle that. More same religion minor allies. They got 10 points for that. That counts. They got that in. They didn't get Britain annexed, and they didn't get the Mediterranean trade. For France, 5 provinces in Burgundy. This is the biggie. 100 points there. The Mediterranean trade, another 30. They didn't have the most minor allies, but they did sleaze away with the most colonies or trading posts in India. No matter how you cut it, they've got 1, 2, 3. The fact that the English destroyed a Portuguese one, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait. No, they didn't get that. I gotta take that off them. I miscounted. Okay. Well, that's 15 points they didn't get. That's just... Anyway, that puts them down to 130, which is the top scorer out of everyone for this period. Not too surprising. Russia, Georgia, they didn't get. They did have the 2 sea zones at 15, but the rest, none of it. And they got the penalty for Balkan provinces. For the Spanish, they got the most sugar in the Americas. They didn't get the Allies, which they were counting on having. At least one of them, maybe both. They didn't get the total monopoly, and they certainly didn't get half of Italy. They took their 10-point penalty. For the Burgundians, they ended up with a positive score for the era. Not terrible. The Turks, no Christians in the Black Sea, well, that failed. Mediterranean trade failed. No Christians in the Aegean failed. And half Muslim vassals failed. All of Turkey and Hungary, yeah, there's a penalty for them. So they ended up with a negative 10. Did I skip Russia? Yeah, well, Russia ended up positive, right? Okay. Austria, I think I touched on Russia. They got very little. All Hungary and Belgrade, yeah. That would have been hard to take away, but if somebody knew they were going for that, maybe they could have pushed forward to try to get into here or into the Hungarian territories. But there was some definite padding there, so it would have been tough to do. And that would have been sort of a hammer against them. Austrian Mediterranean port, yes, because of, well, no, they had Albania no matter what. I was going to say yes because of the Turkish agreement to a white peace, but no, they were going to get that one no matter what. Austrian Emperor, yeah. Most Holy Roman Empire minors, I don't believe they got that. The English have that beat, and nothing annexed, basically. Well, that wasn't going to work, so that's a minus 10. They ended up scoring 105, which is very, very respectable. I mean, the French at 130, we knew the French are kicking butt here. And end-of-period goals are very easy when you're rolling, you know. Austria's been rolling too. And we can see that this is stretching the Austrians ahead of the English. It's going to be really tough for England to catch up to them because Austria's got everything expected and then some. France has everything expected, desired, and then some. England, well, the colonies, you could say, well, are they really expected to have them? They don't have all of them, though. And nothing in Britain. They don't have control of Britain. They're going to get penalized hard for these issues. They don't have India. These are big goals that they're supposed to have arranged. Unfortunately, they weren't ready to face France throughout, without a lot of allies. And even with, they kept getting defeated. You know, a couple of really bad luck wars from the point of view of everyone but France. Really good luck for France, where they were able to really assert their naval dominance in a period where they could inflict a lot of losses on England's ability to produce victory points. I'm not saying it's hard to win with France. France and England are probably the two most likely winners. Spain and the Dutch, actually, have been the only others that I've seen win. So, you know, going from Venice to the Dutch. Well, now we're seeing Austria seems to be able to put a pretty good performance in. They never looked like they would before in the original game to me, but I think they're either the Risto is better than the original for them, or maybe I've just never really looked at it and said, wow, they can kick butt if they've, you know, if Turkey's already failed. Okay. I'll come back after I do the end of game points. Okay, so let's look at the points. Now, what I've done is I kind of spreadsheeted this out and put the base points in the center. This is the total throughout the game. And then below the line here are the original score modifications and then the total. And above the Risto version. But the Risto version is kind of complicated because the Risto version doesn't explicitly allow, and maybe it's not supposed to, it's hard to tell, for the value of colonies. What it says is the value of each province, which could be colonies, could not be. The original rules are very specific. The value of the colonies plus the exotic resources that they produce. That's a big swing. Now, when I finally tallied up the Risto, I think it's not meant to include the colonial possessions. I feel like there's a mistake there. I feel like, for example, Spain's powerful empire here should be worth something. But here's the thing. These colonial possessions largely disappear in not too much time historically. Now, would this happen without an American Revolution? I don't know. But especially the North American ones didn't last long. The British lost everything except Canada. The Spanish lost everything eventually. But still, these are a factor at this particular point. So it's kind of hard to tell. Speaking of which, the gold mine production feels totally wrong. But the way the rules are written, at least in the base rule book, maybe EU8 takes care of this a little better. It's not clear how they get destroyed. Is it only one per depletion that'll get destroyed on a roll of 2 or greater? Or is it that I can do more than one? I can roll more than one. It means that the big mines kept producing. But no matter what, it feels like the gold's just cranking out for too long. You know, Spanish gold was still coming in huge quantities from Potosi and elsewhere at the end of the game. And, you know, larger amounts than early in the game. 190 gold a turn. Wow. I mean, that's what fueled them. That's what made them able to play at all, really. Anyway, let's go on. So, point-wise, there's no big shock here. We can see France wins either way. Now, second place, it depends on which rules we take. If we take the original rules, the English get second place and the Austrians are stuck down in third. If we take the Risto rules, the English are in third place. Why is that? Well, some of it is because certain provinces are just valuable in the Risto rules. There's no, hey, Austria is interested in these specific provinces and therefore gets penalized if they don't have them and gets a bonus if they do. And I don't really care about the double-edged sword there, but on the other hand, for the Risto rules, you just get a bonus for having these important areas that were under dispute. So England gets points no matter what for having any of Ireland. They get no penalty for not having it. They get no penalty for not having Scotland. They're not expected to succeed at anything, but if you happen to be close to a lot of valuable stuff, and France is real close to a lot of valuable stuff, but Austria is too, and England has some. Maybe everybody has some, but the real question is, what about those really conflicted areas? You know, the Netherlands. If you end up walking away with the Netherlands, like France did, you get a lot of points. Italy. Well, Austria might get either of those. It's harder for some other powers like Russia to score big there. And there isn't a lot. It's not like, hey, Poland makes up for that because Russia, Prussia, and Austria were all kind of interested in it. The Balkans a little bit. But anyway, sort of written here in fine pencil print is all the different scoring things. The French got the biggest army, that's a score. Each of the trade fleets, the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, is worth a big chunk of points. Highest tech was worth points. I didn't count on that. Only in the Risto events, I believe. But with the others, there's these serious interesting scoring. So, for example, Austria, in the original rules, gets this huge 10 times bonus for taking Hungarian territory. Of course, they get penalized 5 times for not holding on to the Netherlands. Good luck keeping that when you don't control the decisions on it for most of the game. Spain likewise is interested in them. If Spain doesn't have them, they're penalized 5 times. These things make the game very difficult for some powers, and I don't think there's a lot of balance built into them. Maybe if you really knew the game, you could play it better. If you knew these victory conditions, you could play them better. But here's the thing. That kind of mechanism works fine in something like, I don't know, Here I Stand, Virgin Queen, where, you know, you can really kind of say, okay, Turkey's ahead right now. If we all gang up on them, we can do something to them. That's a lot less plausible in this game. For one thing, you can't control your own destiny to a large extent. A lot of it is just played out by the events, and you're kind of caught up in the spirit of the game and the age and era and everything, and you don't really have a strong focus on what do I need to do to win. Anyway, I was used to the original victory conditions. It seemed clear to me France was winning. It is clear, but I was scared for a little while with the points that Austria was picking up off Hungary. I mean, they were at plus 500 and I was counting, but then they started losing points. Is there anything else I can say here about the point scoring? Yeah, the money. I have already said I don't like the money in the Risto events. I think overall the Risto events scoring at the end is good. But I do kind of like the colonial scoring in the original events. I'm willing to set that aside or wish that there was maybe, I don't know, some factor, say half the economic value or something. I don't know how much it affects though, because when we look at this, well, it's the colonial powers that do fairly well. Spain gets this tremendous boost in this one, which puts them at 451, well above Turkey here. Whereas in this one, it looks like they've fallen into last place in the original rules because of the amount of stuff that they did not get in the victory point things. So actually, they did better under the Risto rules where they're not penalized all over the place than they did in the one where they got a big bonus for their colonial holdings. And it wasn't that big. It's only 100 and something points for the actual production. They don't have a lot of slaves, so they didn't get a lot of raw materials out of that production. Too bad they didn't get the gold out of there. Yeah, that's another 200. That would have helped. and actually pushed them slightly ahead of the Turks. What else do we have? Russia didn't do too badly in this game. I usually consider them a shoo-in for last place. This is the first time I've seen them scoring, and it's the through the game scoring, not losing much of their Portuguese points, as it were, and maybe even gaining a few. 571 sounds higher than they walked into Russia with. So I think it's evened that out a little bit. I'm not sure if Russia can do any better. I mean, I'm sure they can do better than my hand on them. Let's see. I'd like take a few minutes to kind of look at. We looked at the map on one of the earlier ones. I don't want to trace it out. It hasn't really changed. The big interesting things are the French with this domination that's not too far from what they historically had, except they have most of Italy, and they have a little bit of Ireland, and their control in North America is tremendous. Austria, scary big, cutting into Poland, cutting down to the Black Sea. Or to the Baltic, the Mediterranean Sea. That's impressive. Spain, all their possessions really stripped. Turks here in Sicily and on Malta. They were in Sardinia. Spain's down here, though, in North Africa again. Actually, for the first time in this game. Russia, this is pretty much par for the course for Russia. Unable to destroy Poland. The events don't come up that disintegrate it. The events didn't come up that built a big Russia at the beginning of the game. And they just never had the power to go after everything. I know in one of my earlier games they got a lot of territories early and were able to build their colonial holdings here in Siberia up higher. It's hard. So both games have a big victory point bonus if you have lots of colonies that are adjacent, that are level 6. That's tough for Russia to do. There's a lot of space here. You can't really devote your limited, and you have a decent amount, but you have a limited amount of money. So you have a limited amount of rolls that you make on the colonization tables. You pretty much make them count as soon as you drop one thing in there because you're pulling the fur out, which is what you want. And then it's, well, why bother any further? Because I'm not going to get 4 colonies at level 6 easily. I've seen it happen, but they all have to be adjacent to each other, and there's not many places where you can do that and take advantage of the colonies you already placed. Of course, you could build new ones. I've avoided gold mines for the Russians to avoid paying the higher rate of inflation. An extra 20 or 40 bucks at the end of the turn, meaning that I get charged an extra 10% of what I carry over, is tough. We saw diplomacy. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work well in the game until the very end, when countries are really, really economic powerhouses and they can spend that money. Who are the economic powerhouses? Well, in this case, it was England and France. Sometimes Spain's in there. Sometimes the Dutch are in there. Whatever. The mix is always there, but it's tough, say, during Turkey's period, where they need to get allies all over the place, and they need to conquer the world, and they need to take those damn knights out, and they got to take Venice out. So they not only need a land army, a navy, and they have to spend on diplomacy. They just don't have everything. Now, in the original victory conditions, they got penalized for everything they didn't have, and that's true across the board. So basically, if you didn't take, if you took a pick, even if you didn't take a pick, you were probably losing points for it. In the Risto events, the points are almost more positive. Well, they are more positive. They're almost always more positive. And that's kind of, I don't know, a little bit more appealing, because a lot of these carry over, too. And that's true in both of them. Hey, France did well early on. They're scoring points, and they keep racking them up. Somebody's got to stop them earlier than they did. It was hard to see early in the game. I mean, it was obvious they got an advantage in Italy fairly early, third period or so. But it wasn't obvious how much it snowballed, and it really turned into an insurmountable lead for the last couple periods of the game, everybody understood France was the foe. They just couldn't. They got together a couple of coalitions, lost on bad luck, and then couldn't get another one together. It just seemed not worth it. And I don't think, there was any way to catch them. If we look at France's points, they're 600 points, 700 points ahead of their opponents on this side. And on this side, 900, 800. France is doing quite well. And that's one of the problems in the game is, well, once you decide that somebody has won, what's left? Do you play for second? In a lot of games, that's the answer. But if you play this for second, then you're not necessarily opposing France. And clearly, France is a threat to all of Europe and had been from the point where it was noticed. But it was impossible to get people to admit that they should really be fighting France because it was also an impossible situation. They probably would have lost the wars as well. And it trimmed my playing time down. Alright, I think I've talked enough about this particular session of it. I'm going to do a full-on review. I don't know how long it's going to take. It could take an hour for all I know. Because I want to do some depth and some look at the game beyond just, hey, I love this game. Because I do love it, but, it does have some fatigue factor on me. And again, I want to thank those of you who stayed around and watched it. There's no way I could have made the videos. I've played it several times. I would have played it through had I started it without the videos, but it would have been really tough without input, feedback, some of the discussion points that came up. It's that really helps motivate me, especially when I'm doing something this big. And I haven't done something this big before. And I want to apologize also, not so much to those who were watching it all, but to everybody else, both for having to put a pause on everything else, but also, I had no intention to go into this much detail on every single turn. I was hoping to get 2 or 3 turns on a video, put them up, give kind of the broad overview of what was happening. It's hard in this game. Every turn's events seem important. Everything seems so important when you're sitting in here. And part of it is the fact that it takes me a day or two to get through a turn. So, but, I gave very limited quick overviews to things like Empires of the Middle Ages, where I could just skim through and there wasn't much. This one just has so much detail, so much richness to the story, that it's so hard to break away and just say, yep, look, France is growing here and this is growing there. There's just too much story to not tell it. All right, up it goes.